welcome back to Warriors of Light podcast. Hey, Nate, what's up, brother?
What's up? We're here for episode numero 12.
Absolutely. Here we go.
We're going to be talking today about some of our experiences with helping today's youth, which is a very interesting conversation and probably the most important work anybody could do.
Yeah. And we are currently doing that in some of the positions that we are, I guess, led into and asked to do. So it's perfect. Yeah. Like I said, we were talking about it off camera. We're off recording. We were saying, I think we're both being put in positions where we're working with youth in schools. I have a position now that I do. We teach them boxing, and then I teach them, uh, you know, mindfulness. And honestly, like the boxing aspect of it is really just to get them engaged, so that I can really work on their minds. And I love it. Um, Today, I had a great experience with kids that were or that are struggling with stuff, like whether it's at home or I told you I had the one kid today who 100% dressed like gangbanger, act like gangbanger, like his whole thing, right? And I literally was able to bring that kid down to being who he really is, and it was amazing. Most amazing experience. We had the best conversations today. Yeah, we went through some boxing moves and did all that, and then I was able to talk to him about like life and his family and his experiences, and he let go of the whole like I need to be tough, and he just talked to me about, hey, like this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm struggling with, and I'm like, man, I love it. I was like, because um, like I told you before when I first met you, and I tell people when I was younger, hung out with some really tough crowds. They were known to be some of the toughest gangs in that area that I grew up in. But it's kind of funny is like, I going through, well, even that experience, like going through being shot at, which is a whole lot of not fun. I mean, you were in the military, and I'm like, yeah, I did that shit on the streets. Like I got shot out in the streets. Like that was not fun. Like dodging bullets. Um, and then grew up and then got into being a paramedic and a SWAT medic and going into law enforcement and those things. And it's kind of crazy because it's like I see these kids and I'm like, dude, like you have no idea. That's not the life you want to be in the slightest. But I think that where we're in those moments, we think that that's going to help us like be tough and be that guy that's going to be, you and I, we have this podcast, Warriors of Light. What do you think when you're a younger warrior? Well, I can kick someone's ass and I can shoot somebody or, get shot at or, whatever. Right. And, I tell people, I'm like, man, I was like, you really think that that's like the way to go? I'm like, dude, it's not in the slightest. I mean, and as I grew up in that, and then I got into being a medic and saw people shot and murdered and all these things, I'm just like, holy shit, what are we doing? Like, what are we thinking? You know? Um, and we have no idea because we think as a man, especially, that was the other thing, go off on another tangent, is that as men, what are we taught? You need to not be emotional, you need to be a man, you need to do all these things, you need to be tough, right? So that's exactly what I talked to these kids about today, these dudes especially. I was like, I'm telling you right now, I was like, that the fact that they tell you like that you need to be tough and that you can't show your emotions, I was like, that's bullshit. I was like, I'm gonna tell you right now, like I can teach you how to fight all day. I was like, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna teach you how to deal with your emotions. And like these kids were so receptive, and they wanted it. They wanted to learn and know it, And I was just like, this is so amazing. Because I could teach them about like mindfulness and about them figuring themselves out and like letting go and not being this quote unquote like tough dude, which is all bullshit anyway. But taking off the mask and being their true selves, you know.
Yeah,
So
man. Like what we were talking about before we started recording is like a lot of like today, like similarly today, I was at a school giving them a class on health and nutrition, but I also talked to them about, you know, the power of your thoughts and words, like we've talked about before, how what you think you become, and like basically, man, a student even said it. I didn't have to say it. She was like manifestation, and I was like, exactly. So it's like, but what we were talking about was like what you just said. You know, a lot of young people, especially young men, who don't have a positive role model, they crave a positive mentor in their life to show them the way. And a lot of youth, I would say a good amount of youth today don't really have that because, you know, like we talked about before, parents are busy, like, oh, go to school, learn what you got to do good in school. But then the focus isn't necessarily on like, you know how like a kid will listen to like a stranger but not their parent, you know? It's almost like that. But at the same time, like a lot of youth seem to be lacking like any sort of positive motivational direction, especially if they're in like a troubled area or a troubled home. Like they don't have that mentor to be like, hey, like let me take you under my wing and show you like how you can change your life for the better. So something that uh you know is very important because our youth is our future, right? That's the next generation. So like if they go through life and they're gang banging or they're doing drugs or being irresponsible, being silly, then that road's going to lead them to ruin. You know what I mean? So like they don't, if they have someone like you, for example, who's like showing them a positive way to like actually, like you said, like connecting with them and not just being an authoritative figure, and just being like, hey, what's going on in your life? Like, what's this? What's going on? Like, what's this? Like that mask you're talking about? Like, so, once you break down those walls and get through those barriers, then you find who someone really is, and you can truly help them, and then they'll realize, like, oh crap, maybe I can like, maybe this really is, because in a way, by doing that in a nice way, you're almost like calling them out and like, yo, this isn't really who you are, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, sure. Like I said, that the kid I had today, like I said, multiple kids, but the kid I had today, I worked with him and another kid, and they were both like doing some boxing movements, and they both did really well. Um, and then I just stopped. I just stopped all of it, and I was like, hey, like, how's life? How are you guys doing, like, in as a whole? And they're both like, oh shit. And this is the first time I met these kids, and I'm like, no, seriously, like, how's your home life? How are you? And that's when they started saying, well, my parents are busy, and they're this is just what you said. And this is literally the conversation I had with the other coach. I have another coach, Danny, that I work with, and that's what I told him. And he's a little younger than me, and we were talking about stuff. And I told him, I said, like, this is a simple fact with these kids, man. I said they have nowhere to go. A lot of times, they have nowhere to like talk to people, and I want to put this out there just because people can say whatever they want to say about like the way people parent. I'll tell you right now, my kids, like my oldest son is 25 years old. I have three grandkids from him already. He just got hired to a sheriff's department. But that kid, like I had full custody of him from like 5 years old on. And one parenting style I did adopt was to allow my kids to tell me everything. So even when they like quote unquote fucked up, like I'm like, hey, come talk to me. Like it's cool. Like just let me know. I did this, and they would, and you've met Anthony, who's almost 15 years old, and same thing with him. It's like he comes to me about everything, and I try to tell parents, I'm like, listen, I'm not trying to tell you how to parent, like nobody, moms, dads, whoever. But my thing is like I'm gonna tell you right now, when you give your kids an open floor to talk to you, they'll never hide shit from you. They'll never go out on the street and do some stupid shit and then all of a sudden show up and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did this."
I
My kids
believe
come
that.
I'm telling you right now, my kids come to me and they're like, "Hey, like dad, blah blah blah, blah." And I'm like, "Okay, perfect." Like and we talk about it. And I help them understand that there could be like a really fucked up experience if you do these things. But like I tell my kids, I'm like, "Listen, like I love my parents. I have great parents, but my parents were like, old school. Like, hey, well, not don't do this, don't do this, and I'm like, okay, cool, and I went and did it anyway, right? And that's what I tell people. It's like they're gonna go do it anyway. Like, so why don't you just give them a ground to be like, hey, I experienced this one situation that was really like odd. I tried this drug, whatever it is, right? Um, and my kids, they come to me and they're like, hey, like dad, like I tried this and I did that, and I'm like, okay, like what was your thought? What was your what happened, right? And I talk to them about it, and that's why I like coaching these kids. I go to these high schools, and I'm telling you, these kids come to me and they're just like, dude, like, yeah, I'm experiencing this right now. I'm struggling with that right now, and I'm like, cool, like, let's talk. Let's figure it out together, because most of these kids can't go to their parents and say, hey, I'm really fucking struggling with this because I have, whatever, because their parents are like, oh my God, like, I tell people all the time, I was like, listen, and it comes down to me, it comes down to a bigger basis of like, think about the way we're all fucking like raised and the way we're grown, right? Whether it's fucking like a parent, a religion, government, whoever, like, if you do this and this, you're bad. If you do this and this, you're good. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you have all these fuckers that are like supposedly like standing on a fucking pew and a pulpit, and they're saying they're fucking great, and they're over there, doing some shady shit behind the scenes, right?
They're snorting coke and banging hookers, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No shit, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. And so, like, to me, I'm like, no, like, be real, be real with people. Like, that's what I tell my kids. That's what I tell people I coach. I'm like, hey, listen, I've done this, that, and the other. Like, hell yeah, like I have. And do I continuously work on myself? Absolutely, all the time, every day. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm not even close, but I always try. And that's what I teach the youth that I work with. I'm like, listen, like, as long as you are like aware and trying to work on who you are, that's all that matters, man. Like, you're not gonna be perfect. I mean, and you may get to the place where you fuck, dude, you never do anything, like, kind of off, I guess. Um, but we're taught that fucking, like, there's good and bad, and it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Because, like I said, you have the people that are fucking preaching to you, and that guy's over there doing all kinds of crazy shit, touching little boys. Who knows? Sorry, I know that fucking sounds bad, but I'm just saying, like, you just never know, Yeah, I'm just saying, and so I try to teach these kids. I'm like, listen, like, you're gonna be struggling through shit, and just understand that, like, like, when you have a safe ground to come to, and you have a safe person to come to, um, you're gonna be able to heal. You're gonna be able to grow, right? I mean, it's like I told you when I met you. I mean, I've held meditation groups and wellness groups for years, and I love it because I love getting people the place where they can come in and be like, yeah, like, I haven't told anybody this shit in 20 years. Like, cool, come and tell me, because I'm not gonna judge you. Fuck, I don't care.
Well, that's interesting that actually that we're talking about this is because I was just having this conversation with my mother-in-law earlier, and this actually I think this kind of relates to how we're kind of like in the age of awakening, and it's like we're everyone a lot of people I talk to now, which I never would have expected, like years ago. But a lot of people now are talking about, oh, we all live in this fucked up system. Like energy is, or people are talking about energy. People are talking about manifestation. People are talking about breaking generational curses or whatever you want to call it.
Breaking the
And
chain.
yeah, there you go. And I feel like what you and I talk about, like what you said, like certain people are called to do certain things, right? Like you have a purpose, and it's just interesting to me, like to me as a like let's talk if we talk about parenting, like that's one thing I made like I've fucked up before, like in my marriage and stuff like that. Like we're decent now, but like fucking the one thing I always promised myself is that I would not fuck up as a father. You know what I mean? Because like my parents were the only ones to never get divorced out of most of my family, except for my grandparents. Um, and fucking I saw, like, growing up in high school, my friends who, like, their parents were divorced, or they didn't have a dad, or dad wasn't in their life. And I don't know, now that I have children, I'm like, you know what, I might fail in this or that, but I will not fail as a father. And I feel like a lot of people, as humans, we just get so caught up on our shit. Like, oh fuck, I'm not happy in the house, I'm not happy in this relationship, blah blah blah. So sometimes people think the best way to do things is to, like, just nix it. But if you're able to grow through stuff and go through stuff with someone, and some people make the argument like, oh, you shouldn't stay together just because of the kids. And I'm like, to a certain extent, I do agree with that. But I also feel like each person, when you make a commitment, like, you have, I call it like sacrificial love, right? Like, given this, given the scenario, like, okay, if separation is best, then okay, right? But for me, just in my personal experience, I was like, I'm not gonna fucking allow my kid to be raised by somebody else when they need, because even my mother-in-law told us yesterday, she's like, the thing with your, like, with our son, for example, he's like, some parents separate and they fucking gravitate to one parent or the other, but she was like, this kid loves both of you the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, when we were going through our shit, I was like, how much harder would it be on my son if he for him to be so young and not understand why his daddy not home? You know what I mean? And that's the thing, is like, people are just so quick. We're in this era of instant gratification. We want things to happen miraculously, but no one wants to fucking put in the work. You know what I mean? And not to dig on people who go through separation, because of course sometimes that's necessary, right? Yeah. But like, from just from my experience, I'm like, you know what? This is a part of, life. Like, once you have a kid, life's not about you anymore. You know what I mean? It's about what can you do for that child, because that's your responsibility now. And you can be responsible even if you're not in the home. But that's what I'm leading to, is that reminds me of, like, something actually Denzel Washington said, is like, it starts in the home, right? All the shit we're talking about right now, it starts in the fucking home. So it's like, you know, like, for example, boys without their fathers tend to get in more trouble because they don't have a positive father figure, or maybe they have a piece of shit dad who's doing fucked up shit, like drugs or gang banging or whatever, or fucking being a shitty alcoholic parent or something. You know what I mean? But they don't have a positive role model to look to. So it's like, or in that same instance, they think, oh, this is normal. This is how things are supposed to be because the adults are doing it. So that's how my life will be. Right. And then, so I don't know, man. My heart just goes out to these kids who don't have that daily positive interaction, other than they don't really have interactions with anyone other than, like, an authoritative figure. Like you said, there's no, like, safe zone for them to be like, to let their walls down and be like, all right, let me actually be real. But a lot of people are living in a mask because they feel like they have to protect themselves, you know?
Well, yeah. So, and it's not to go against or challenge what you're saying, but it's just, for me, perfect example. I have kids and I have exes, and I've been married a couple times, and did my shit. I always meant well. It didn't always work out the way I hoped it would, I guess. But it taught me a lot. And when I work with and teach my kids, I'm like, hey, this is a deal, man. Like I wasn't a perfect husband by any means, and uh, you know, several of my scenarios
None of
because
us
I did
are, Brian.
oh, shit. Yeah, no, absolutely no. I just look at like I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing until I figured it out. I told you, like I've told you this before. You and I have had these conversations where in these last I was married, to my ex-wife for almost 10 years. And when I went through this divorce process, it showed me, I was like, holy shit, like, wait a minute, like, what are you doing? Like, what am I doing wrong? Right. Like I'm like, like I'm not gonna point at her. Like she has a lot of great things. She has her shit that she has to work on, but I'm like, what the fuck are you doing that has not allowed you in these like last, this marriage and the marriage before, like these like relationships. Like, what are you doing wrong? And I'm like, holy shit! Like it was me just living in a space of always trying to protect myself because I was hurt when I was young, right? And so I tell people like, you know, everything we go through is there to teach us and help us grow. It's like we talked about, right? And so,
Exactly, dude. Yeah, 100%. Like, even like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, because like I just had this conversation the other day. Like exactly what you just said. Like, certain shit happens for a reason, because you're meant to learn that lesson, right? Even if it, like, I'm not trying to say like, oh, you got divorced, it's bad, fucking evil, you know what I mean, or you're fucked up or whatever, you know what I mean. But
no, I
it's
know what
like,
you're saying.
but we've talked about how there are people who think like that, and it's like, no, sometimes things have to happen so that you can grow, like you just said, so that you can see beyond. Sometimes you need to take a step back to get clarity, you know?
Well, and then the other thing is the other example I've learned from couple that have been married for 30 years, and I've heard, some of them say like, man, I shouldn't be here anymore. I should have been gone out of this a long time ago. And I'm like, see, that's my point. And that's my thing. Like I tell people, like, you have to understand. So you're gonna stay in that marriage for 50 years because of a religious belief or whatever it is. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I don't agree with it. Like, and that's just, again, that's just my own belief system, I guess you can say that as I've grown, because I'm like, I teach my kids, I'm like, listen, there are seasons in our lives, right? So you're with somebody, and that person could be there for 6 months, a year, a month, it doesn't matter. That season comes to an end and then you move on. And that doesn't mean that, it's funny because, like I said, again, a lot of times we live off one thing because of what we were taught. I did. I mean, like, to be completely honest, like, I mean, when I was first, like, you know, with my exes and doing these things, I was over there like, fuck, dude, I'm supposed to fucking get married and be here for 50 years. But then I learned, I was like, wait a minute, like, this shit's not healthy for any of us anymore, you know? And it's kind of like you were saying about the kids. My mom and I've had this conversation multiple times. I tell people all the time, I was like, think about it. So you have a really shitty situation, shitty fucking environment. Like, it's all shit, right? You're always arguing. It's always negative. Like, most kids like don't want that. Like, they're like, what the hell? Like, I would just rather you guys not be together, you know? And and I think about like my kids that have gone on and moved forward and done good things. Because their mom and I maybe just weren't the healthiest, and I'm like, hey, you guys understand, like, fucking. So think about this. There's, which I'm sure I don't know if you've heard this. This it's called Conscious Uncoupling. There's books on it. There's fucking like all this shit. Conscious Uncoupling. And I tell people, see, this is the thing to me. It's huge to me. I tell people all the time, like, why can't we say we were in a relationship for, I don't care if we were fucking a year, 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. A fucking month, doesn't matter. But we say, if we had a kid, we're going to do the best we can to be like the best friends, and we're going to fucking raise that child, right? I think that's the healthiest and the most beautiful thing you can do. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that, like, fucking, like, that's your ex, so now we're enemies. And I'm like, why are you an enemy? Like, we both had a period of like really enjoying each other. I don't care if it was fucking a month. You had a period of fucking really like enjoying being together. So why can we not be friends and then raise this kid, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing is that, I think about like these systems like child support and this and that. There's all these court systems that really fuck with people, and they cause negativity amongst the couple, right? So I'm like, why can't we just both be the best of friends and be like, hey, we had a kid. Like, let's go raise this kid and give them the best fucking option and opportunity in this life, right? Um,
Yeah,
but
I agree with you because, like you said, on one token, if the house, like for example, if the household is there, if things are just like negative and toxic all the time, then yeah, something has to change, right? And sometimes that change means separation. At the same time, I 100% agree with what you just said because, like, dude, just because something ends doesn't mean you have to hate someone or like, because
yeah, no,
like you're a perfect example of how you handle yourself. Like you're a great person, you know what I mean? And it's proven through your children, you know what I mean? So it's like that's what I guess that's what I mean when I'm like I will not fail as a father because like me and my wife has had plenty of times when we're like, all right, fucking let's cut sling load, we're done.
yeah,
And then I'm like, fuck man, like what the fuck am I gonna do? And then I'm thinking about the kids and all this other shit, and I'm just like, no matter what happens, I think, well, you might agree with this. Like, no matter what happens, even if, like, I agree with you on that. Like, that doesn't mean you have to hate the person or fucking have this animosity and be. But like, also what you said, unfortunately, there are systems in place that kind of draw people into that negativity just because it's all fucking legal, fucking against your will bullshit. You know?
yeah, 100%. That's what I'm like. That's my thing with like when it, like the child support system. It's not that I don't want to fucking like help my kids. It's like you're gonna tell me that you're gonna fuck me over day in and day out for all this money, which doesn't matter. Fine. And then if I have a hard time in my life and you keep fucking me, then you're gonna fucking like take my license. You're gonna, you're gonna do all these things, and I'm like, so how is that giving me the opportunity to really take care of and love my child?
Yeah, I would say, I think there's an argument to be made that that system is fucked.
It's fucking dude, 100%. Like I literally like I've I've advocated for people, and I've done that, especially like men, like women too, but men especially because I'm like these guys are trying, and the system is like, oh well, you're behind on your child support, so I'm gonna fucking suspend your license.
Dude, in some states you can go to jail.
Yeah, and I'm like, hey, fucktard, how the fuck are you telling me that I'm supposed to take care of my kid, but you're gonna fucking take my life? You're gonna fuck with me like as a whole, you know? And I'm like, that makes absolutely no common sense to me in the slightest. And so, and I say that because I tell people like, funny, because like I said, I had full custody of my oldest son, who was 25 years old, for fuck when he was 5 years old on, and never asked his mom for a dollar. She saw him 4 days a month, 4 days a month, and I never asked her for a fucking dollar, you know. And I'm like, it's crazy because I think about one of my exes, like fucking the minute she got a chance to get child support, she was like, hell yeah, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what goes on in your mind and your heart? Because I never asked for a dollar because I was like, hey, I'll figure out how to take care of my son. Like I'll work, I'll build my careers, my businesses, everything I've always ever done, and then these systems give these. And I'm not just trying to say it on women, but like they give these women like, hey, fucking fuck them and get a bunch of money from them. Like, what are you doing? Like that is not a legitimate way of doing anything, right?
And then think about what that does to the kids.
Yeah,
If they're old enough to understand that, then they're gonna have a completely different view of the parents overall because it's like, what the fuck? Especially if they're like teenagers, you know, at, like it's a hard thing because for a young person to go through that, which I believe a lot of troubled kids these days have gone through that because like if you look at like 50% of all marriages end in divorce, right?
yeah, over 50% nowadays.
And it's like but the what stems from that is these children who have broken homes or whatever. Not every case, obviously, like yours, like you've done obviously a fucking great job, but like Some fucking kids, they just have shitty parents. Like we talked about, they don't have a place to come home and be themselves. They always have to have those walls up, man. And then like if they go through a system like that, and then if you have a parent talking bad about the other, it's like, no, you're not enemies. But some people look at it like that, and it just creates more of a toxic environment. And then the kid grows up like, what the fuck, you
Well,
know?
exactly. And that's the whole point. It's like, like I told, like I said, is I work by all means, I haven't been perfect, but I've done my best to always be like, hey, your mom's trying as good as she can. She's doing the best she can. Whatever it is, right? Like to give some kind of like positive reinforcement toward them. And I haven't, again, when I was younger, I didn't always do that. As I've gotten older, I've learned that, hey, guess what? Like fucking like everybody is going through their struggles, right? We're all going through our shit. And so I tell people, it's like, and that's what I look at. Is like I look back, I look on people now, and I'm like, God, like what is she going through? Because I guarantee you, she's got some shit that she's struggling with that maybe she doesn't even know who to share that shit with, right?
And
And so
sometimes people feel like they have no one to share it with.
exactly, and that's exactly what I said this today when I was working with those kids, and I told the other coach I was working with. I said, that he goes, dude, he goes, it was so cool the way you gave them like that ground. And I said, because I said, you know why, bud? I go, half these kids, adults, anybody I work with, coach, I go, adults especially. I told him, I said, I have these adults that are married and they have no fucking clue like how to get this shit out because they don't want to tell their spouse because their spouse is going to judge them, right?
See, that's
And
the
so,
key, man. That's the key is judgment, the fear of
yeah,
judgment.
exactly, and that's the point. And like I tell people, I'll tell you right now, and I'm sure I've said this on previous podcasts. I believe that two of the biggest reasons that we're here is to learn how to love unconditionally and give no judgment, right? Give infinite grace, and I work on that every day. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, you can come to me and be like, I did X, Y, and Z. Like, okay, cool. Like, let's talk about it. Because, like, we all fuck up. We all do shit. Like, sin is a fucking, like, again, I tell people the meaning of sin, the word sin is you miss the mark. That's the actual meaning of sin. You miss the mark. So you missed the mark. So you fucked up today. Guess what? We miss the mark on fucking multiple days all the time. And I tell people all the time, I was like, fucking, so I want to give you the opportunity to come to me and be like, hey, like, I really had a fucking shitty situation. Okay, perfect. Like, let's work together and let's figure out how we can fucking like get better. And that's the thing is like, and the other thing was today, what I talked to the kids about was self-love. I tell people, like, do you love yourself? Because most of these kids have zero self-love. Like they don't like themselves at all, right? And I tell people, I'm like, I don't care if you're a kid or you're an adult, whoever you are, that like we're here to like truly love ourselves. People can say that's like selfish and whatever. Love who you are. Like
If you can't love yourself, then how can you love anybody else?
no shit. And that's the point. That's why think about we're talking about relationships. Why can you not have a successful relationship? Because you can't fucking love anybody else because you don't love you. You know. And I've learned, and I still continue to learn. Like, hey, I love me. Like, I'm okay with me. Like, fucking, I'm not perfect. I'm happy with me. I'm happy with Brian. Like, fucking, Brian's always like trying to be a better version. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, like, fucking, I love myself. You know, and I used to listen to exes or other people, and they were pointing fingers at me, and I'm like, hey. And what I realized was, and this is the biggest message I want to get to the world. When people are fucking like talking shit about you, it's a projection of themselves. It
Amen, brother.
is 100% projection of who they are. Has nothing to do with you. Doesn't mean you're good. Doesn't mean you're perfect. But they're fucking pointing out shit that they don't like about themselves inside of you.
Well, dude, that's what we talked about that even in the workplace. Like, it's like, motherfucker, you don't know who I am, and you're gonna judge me based off of one little mistake or one thing. It's like, dude, you don't know who the fuck you're dealing with. Some of that is a little bit of ego, but it's like reality is like we talked about value, like how we were talking about valuing yourself and value or know your worth, right? It's not just applied in the workplace, it's applied in everything. Know your worth, you know? And then you surround yourself with people who earn the right to sit at the table with you. You know what I mean? There's that concept, because so many people, like I talked about to these to these students today, I was like, we live in an age of instant gratification, and like we're not designed to sit down all day and look at screens and all this other stuff. And it's like everybody just wants the end result, but no one wants to do the fucking work, you
Yeah,
know?
it's like,
And it's like a lot of that work is uncomfortable.
of course, it's like I told the kids today. I go, who here loves to fucking be on social media and get a like, you know? And all the kids, their hands are, oh shit, their hands are up, you know? And I was like, I told them, I said, do you realize that like 99% of those likes they don't give a fuck? Like they're not doing it because they fucking truly care. And they're all the kids were like, what? And I remember this girl, she goes, what do you mean? And I was like, they don't give a fuck. I was like, they're fucking just quickly hitting a like, boom, boom, boom. I go, and all you're getting is a quick dopamine hit. I go, like a drug for your brain, right? I go, think about if you love yourself right now, you love who you are, you love what you do, you love who the fuck you are as a fucking whole being, and it doesn't matter what anybody else fucking says about you. And she was like, well, yeah. And I said, that's the point.
Dude, that's the most free anyone could be, is if you're just doing your thing, you don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And that's not to say you don't value people that are close to you, like their advice or whatever.
But even
But
that, like, you know what? It's like I think I told you this before, and it's like my biggest spiritual mentor, Wayne Dyer, said. He goes, I can't remember who he learned it from, but he said he goes, a true self actualized person is a person that doesn't give a shit about a good or bad opinion about you, right? So someone could come along and be like, "Hey Nate, you're fucking amazing." Who cares? Fuck them. It doesn't matter, right? Even though they fucking patted you on the back and told you you're amazing, it doesn't matter because you are happy with who you are, right?
yeah,
And
it's just
that's
like you're doing the right thing, so fuck off. I don't need your fucking fake ass, because a
I
lot of
don't
that
need
shit's fake too.
I don't need I don't need your validation. I don't need your fucking high five. Like it doesn't matter.
Boom.
Like
You just hit it on the head. You don't need anybody else's validation.
no,
And a lot
nobody.
of people, especially young people, they seek outside validation because they don't understand what we're talking about right now.
Yep. And that's why I say is I've learned that I don't need anyone. I don't care if it's my family, my kid. Do I have kids, grandkids, whatever? I don't need anybody to come along and tell me, "Hey, you're doing great." I don't need anyone. And it doesn't mean I don't care. And that's the other thing. That's what's funny about society is that fucking like society is like, oh, so you're selfish, you don't give a fuck. I'm like, no, it's not about not giving a fuck. It's called fucking like loving myself enough to know that I don't need you or someone else to tell me that I'm good or I'm shitty. You know? You could fucking like pat me on the back and be like, dude, you did a great job. Or you can fucking tell me, hey, you're a fucking idiot. Cool, perfect. Like I love myself anyway. Like, so fuck you. Like I'm good. And
Well,
it doesn't mean that I don't care about other people. It just means that I fucking love myself enough to know that I don't need anyone else's fucking opinion. You know? And that's a truly self-actualized person. And that's what I tell people is like, fucking that it takes work. It does. Don't get me wrong. It takes fucking time, but it's like it's funny because we talk about you and I are talking about different things, and I'll have like my ex or kids' moms or whatever occasionally say shit like oh blah, 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 I'm like cool like you think I care about your opinion? I don't because I really don't, and it's not because I'm fucking like a selfish asshole. It's because I fucking just love myself. Like I know who I am. You
that's
know,
because, dude, there's a big danger in um constantly looking for that validation from outside.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Because if you're constantly seeking validation from everybody else but yourself, then you don't value yourself and you're never going to grow to the potential that you could go to if you just kind of, it's almost like letting go in a way. It's sort of like being kind of like stoic, or like, I don't know how to
Hey,
describe it. You know what I mean?
well, hey, there's that book by Mark Manson. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Seriously, that's the name of the book, and I love it. And it's so funny with him because I love him. He's an author, but it's funny because like he wrote that book and he was like, yeah, so hard not giving a fuck. He's like, yeah, you just don't give a fuck, like whatever. But what he talks about too is like he said, he goes, and people tell him like, well, what are you, an author? Or are you a whatever? He goes, I don't give a fuck what I am. He's like, I may not even be an author tomorrow. Like, I may be a fucking God knows what. And that's the thing, man. It's like humans always have to fucking have like titles on shit and meanings on shit. And I tell people like, what the fuck for? What does that title or that meaning fucking matter? It doesn't. Because tomorrow you may not be that.
You might be dead tomorrow,
Yeah, no shit.
you know?
And I tell people, I'm like, so what the fuck does it matter? I'm like, God, get over it, dude. Get over the fucking like the stupid titles, the stupid meanings. Like, just be you. Like, what are you in this moment? Like, I'm a happy whoever, right? Like, I'm serving people. I love people. I'm happy. Fucking like speak. It doesn't matter. Like, and that's why I say it's like it's funny because like I learned that from like a lot of my spiritual mentors. They were like, yeah, don't give yourself titles. Don't say you're a fucking speaker or you're a spiritual fucking teacher or you're it doesn't matter. And yeah, I just, man, I don't give a fuck. I just want to fucking make a difference in each moment that I do. And like I said, like today, being there with those kids, I had no fucking, to me, I had no title. My shit says coach. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care about that. Like, fucking, like, I'm here with you. Like, let's talk. Let's figure some life out.
Well, dude, it's just like that's that's how our whole society is structured too. Because like people will be like, "Oh, I have a degree, I have a
Yeah.
PhD, so you have to call me doctor." And it's like your fucking piece of paper doesn't mean you know shit. By the way, experience is the end all be all, right? So it's like all these like, but unfortunately, our society is structured around titles, and it's
Not to cut
like
it off, not to cut you off, but just real quick, you said PhD. It's like fucking it's like I love Robert Kiyosaki. He says that what PhD stands for? He says what does he say? He goes poor, helpless, and desperate. I love that shit. You know? And he goes job. He goes, you know what job stands for? Just above broke.
yeah.
Like sincerely, and so I think about these stupid little titles, and I'm like, dude,
But
like
dude,
it's all
that's exactly the box. When you look, when we're talking about kids these days and the youth, what people don't realize is that we've already put everyone in a box. It's like, oh, like for example, we talked about this in another episode where it's like, oh, you need to go to college or you need to do this, that. It's like, let them discover what they really want to do on their own. Don't
yeah.
push something on them just because it was your failed dream or because you were told this, you know?
Well, it's like we said, it's like and I know we did say this on a previous podcast, is it's a fucking belief system, right? You need to go to school, you need to get this fucking degree and go to fucking do this. And I'm like, dude, do you know how many people I know that have fucking BAs and shit that they work at Starbucks and they fucking like they don't care about their fucking degrees? Dude, when I went to medic school, which truly has a fucking really high failure rate, um, I had friends that were in there that had fucking like these BA degrees and like this other random shit. And I'm like, why did you be why did you want to become a medic? Well, fuck, I don't want to do that shit. So you spent all that money and time in a fucking college to fucking like to say you don't want to do it? And they're like, well, My parents, I don't give a dude. Tell your parents I love you, but fuck you. I mean, yeah, you know, fuck, dude. And that's the thing is like, it's funny because my parents, like I said, my mom, she was a school teacher for years and years, and my dad was a mechanic. And I was fucking the only one that was fucking like complete different. Fucking went in and fucking became a fucking EMT, then a medic, and then fucking a SWAT medic. I just did all this like random shit that's like has nothing to do with anything my family did. And plus we had fucking well, of course I had a business, but my family had businesses that were dairies, um, because Portuguese people that's the business to go to, right? And but mine wasn't that. Mine was a fucking wellness business. And that's why I said, like all of my family was like, dude, you did nothing that we did. I was like, no shit. I was like, no fucking shit.
Yeah, because if you, that's the
No,
thing. If you just fall in line, then nothing's ever going to change.
no shit. Yeah.
It's the same thing with me. Like I guess I was fortunate because my parents never really pushed me to do anything. They were just like, do what you want to do. I'm like, okay. And then one day, dude, back in
Then
the
you be,
day,
then
huh?
you then you be, then you became transgender.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
yeah, I'm a lamp. I identify as the fireplace that's behind us. Yeah. But but
Uh,
fucking but it was funny because when I basically went to the recruiter when I was 18 and I was like, I don't think I told my parents. But I didn't enlist yet, but I went to talk to the recruiter and they were like, "Oh fuck," because it was wartime then. And they were like, "What the fuck?" But they're like, "If this is what you want to do," they supported me. You know, they came to the recruiter with me. But the same kind of similar story to you. I didn't do what anybody else did, and I
yeah.
also didn't listen to all the naysayers who were like, I had teachers in fucking high school that were like, "You should be a teacher," and I'm like, back then, I was like, well, then what better way to teach than to become a leader in the military and teach our soldiers, right? That was my mindset too. There's a lot of different things of why, a lot of different reasons why I joined the military, but I didn't listen to. They were like, you shouldn't join. You're gonna get, PTSD and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, I'm gonna do what I feel is right to do with my life.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
shit. Yeah. That was the same thing with me. It's fucking like, I when I found out my son's mom was pregnant and I was 17 years old and I was fucking, a top tier, according to my coaches, top tier football player. And they're like, that fucking like you're like ready to go, like they'll take you into college and they'll fucking do all this shit. And especially because I wasn't fucking like super tall, nothing like that. Like I didn't have any of the fucking like the absolute like fucking I guess you could say like stats, like typical stats, but they were like your fucking football stats, like fucking who you are as a running back and all this shit. They're like, yeah, you're fucking like, dude, like they're gonna take you, like they love you, and I got fucking like letters and people and whatever and hey blah blah all this bullshit, and they're like, oh my god, like fucking like they're gonna fucking take you and fucking you're gonna be a football star. And but it's funny though. But what I do with what this thing is, I tell kids when I work with them is I tell them, I said, you know what the problem with that was is I took over the fucking the the belief that I needed to be home to be a dad. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
I told myself that no, I gotta get a job and I gotta do all this shit and I gotta fucking be a dad and all this crap. And I'm not saying like, I mean I raised my son, but
Well, that's a lot of people would say that's admirable.
yeah, but no, and I get that. But what I'm saying is I now look back on it and I think about how like what could I have done? you know and I think about, because I also think about, because of fucking like being from the valley, Fresno State had David Carr and all those guys, and they had a kid, David Derek, I don't know, one of them had a kid, and they fucking did whatever and they fucking ended up like playing ball. And I'm like, see, that's my point. It's like, I again, everything happens for a reason, and I really realized that fucking like I live life by what I was taught, not by what I fucking followed, you know, and who knows what will happen with that, but
But at the
it's all
same time, like you just said, everything happens for a reason. So maybe you wouldn't be the same as you are today if something different happened, you know?
no, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have the same experiences, right? I mean, I obviously wouldn't have the same experience. I wouldn't be the same uh, dad or you know husband or whoever, you know, whatever you want to call me, um, if I wouldn't have done that. So yeah, for sure. Like yeah, I had to experience it. I had to experience it, and for sure. And like I said, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot, like sincerely. And when I work with these kids nowadays, I'm just like, oh my god, I'm like fucking just listen for a second, dude.
Yeah,
You
man.
know,
Like, um, actually, if you want to talk a little bit about that, because we talked about that on the phone, we were talking about titles. Why don't you talk about your time as a young football player with that play you ran? Uh, Remember how you were talking to me about how you like your coach wanted you to do one thing and you're like, fuck it, I'm doing this, and it won the game or whatever?
oh yeah, no, yeah, no, it didn't win the game, but yeah, 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 for sure. Um, it's funny because when I teach these kids, I teach anybody any kind of like sport or whatever. I tell them, I said, you know, the most talented athletes are the ones that can read what's going on, right? And so when I became when I became where when they put me into being a tailback, a running back, um, I was like, okay. So I was like, you know, I was running back. I'm sitting here. I'm sitting back behind the quarterback and I'm watching defense. And I remember just like, you know, I remember just like watching people's eyes and I'm watching the defense's eyes. And I'm like, holy shit, like I can see where they're about to go. Like they're looking at where they're going to fucking go. And I'm like, this motherfucker's about to go right into the hole that I'm supposed to fucking run into, you know? And so I used to fucking see it and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, no big deal. And fucking quarterback called the call, boom. And I get the ball and I do my own thing, right? And I'd fucking gain hella yards or get a touchdown or do whatever I was gonna do. And then my coaches would be like, hey, what call did we call? And I'm like, yeah, you know, 32 blast or whatever, you know. They're like, is that what you ran? I was like, no. I was like, but I saw the fucking like linebacker, fucking his eyes, he was like already right there. Like he was there before the fucking before the play even started. And they were like, well, okay. And I was like, I said, plus I go, I got us a fucking I got us a touchdown, I got us a yard, you know, whatever. Um, and what I what I equate that to is life, right? Like you can look at life and be like, this motherfucking thing is gonna really fuck me up. Like, fuck this. Like I'm gonna make a different fucking I'm gonna pivot and make a different fucking choice. Right. And and sports can lead you to that where when you're an athlete you can fucking like really look at shit and be like oh my god. And so it's funny because like the guy that's like my coaching or my boxing coach, that's what he says. He's like, he goes, yeah, he goes, you see shit. And he goes, and that's why you move the way you move. And I said, yeah. I said, I move real quick, boom. Like I can move my shoulders, I can move my fucking face, like whatever, it doesn't matter because I see shit real quick. And I look at that in life. I add that to life too. I'm like, dude, I'm like fucking like, you know, I'm not always gonna fucking follow the one play I think it should be. Cause see, people will tell you life should be this way, right? But what if you can just make that quick pivot and make life so much better, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what I do with life. Like I do that with sports and I do that with life. Like I fucking like I look at things and I'm like, ah, I don't know, this shit doesn't look right. And I fucking do something else, bam, and it just makes it better. And I'm just like, it's real quick. Like I avoided some bullshit, you know, and that's why, you know, um, I think about when I was, like I said, when I was in football, um, because our offensive coordinator would always be like, hey, I told you this, I called this call, I did whatever. And I'm like, cool, but what did I do? Like, I gained us, you know, 20 yards when we would have fucking been shut down in 1 or 2 yards. And they were like, yeah, they're like, but you know, and I told them, I said, like, I always see shit ahead of time. And that's what I started to learn about life. You can see shit ahead of time. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You really can, man. You really can. And that's what I tell people is like fucking like just step back, slow down, and then look at life and you're like, oh shit. It's not gonna go good. Let me do this. And then you do something else and you're like, ah fuck, I'm so glad I did that. You know? I mean, and so that sport analogy, like fucking for me, being an athlete, it always worked for me. And I'm like, oh shit. And then I started to learn how to like adapt that to life too. Um, to put me ahead of fucking the game, you know? Because I really think life's a game. I think it is. I think it's a matrix. I think it's bullshit. And I think it's all fucking the game, you know?
Yeah, man, like all this shit happening with the eclipse, everybody's freaking out about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Like
And
that.
it's
Yeah.
like all these people are like, "Oh, it's the end of days. It's fucking the end of the world." It's like, no, it's not.
No. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? No. You
But that's what
know?
we're talking about. People are programmed to believe a certain thing, and then they're like, "Oh my god!" And then, like, I was having this conversation earlier. I was like, with the eclipse, the only thing I'm worried about is people doing dumb shit and maybe some natural disasters. That's it. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
worried about fucking the Earth exploding or fucking hell on Earth. But but oh man, yeah. I mean, that's a good analogy to use because that's a part of intuition and also a little bit about faith too. Is like trusting yourself to make the right call, even though someone who has a title is telling you to do something else. Because I've had that, you know, in my time in the military or like fucking even in the civilian world. I'm just like, you want me to do this one thing, but it makes no sense and it's gonna take longer and be stupid, or I could do it this way and get the shit accomplished faster and more efficiently. So being able to think for yourself, which I feel like we a lot of youth aren't taught to think for themselves these days. I feel like they're all programmed like, oh, I gotta go to school, I gotta fucking do this, do that, and it's like, no, like yeah, go to school so you can learn, but like I was having this conversation earlier, it's like, and we had this conversation before, it's like kids, oh, I lost them. Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
But but what I was saying is that kids are fucking programmed to believe a certain thing and they don't realize it because they're young. So like this is how I have to do everything because someone who's authoritative said this,
yeah,
and then
no,
that's why we have all these fucking adults now that are in hundreds of thousands of college debt, or they hate their fucking life because they listen to everybody else except for themselves, and now they hate their life in a job that they don't like, or like what you said, all these people with these degrees who ended up going to EMT school anyway or paramedic school or whatever because they're like, I didn't want to do that fucking shit. You know?
dude. I had, like I said, I had so many people in my paramedic class who had BAs and like this other random shit, and I'm like, I remember my friend Brandon. He had his fucking BA in fuck did he have it in? Sociology or some bullshit, right? And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, did you use it? And he's like, no. It's like, are you gonna use it? He's like, no. I said, that's the point. Now you're becoming a paramedic. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, makes no sense. And as I told him, I was like, dude, I was like, I don't get it with you. I was like, I don't get it with people. I said, I'm not trying to knock you. If you want to go to college, go ahead, have fun. I said, I've been in college, and I said, I have an associate's. Well, my medic program gave me an associate's degree, and then beyond that, because of law enforcement shit I did, so I have probably just below a BA. But I mean, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm like, I don't care. Like, that shit doesn't make me special, you know. And I'm like, it's just crazy to me. Um, these people going to do all these things, and it's like, I told them, I was like, it's a business, right? Like,
Yeah.
So you just spent how much on a 4-year degree? They're like, oh yeah, I know, like fucking 150 grand. I'm like, yeah, no shit, you're still in debt. And the other thing is this is the other fucking deal is, and I we probably talked about this in our past podcast, but people that don't that get into shit they don't want to do. Like I have friends that are doctors that the only reason they became a doctor is because that's what their family told them they were supposed to do. You know, and being a medic and going into these ERs and dropping off patients and getting to know doctors and friends, becoming friends with doctors and stuff. And they're miserable. They're unhappy as shit. They're fucking like just stressed out of their minds. And I'm like,